what the industry is looking to find out is how video is changing in online media. How is video being consumed in online media now?
It's interesting. Video started because we want to tell stories. And the stories that we needed to tell couldn't be told any other way. If before video there was radio, and radio could tell stories in a way that print books couldn't, because in print you had to use your imagination. In radio you could hear what the environment was like. Well, now in television you can see what it's like, and you can bring to life things that existed only in your imagination. In that sense, video hasn't changed at all, whether it goes online or whether it goes on tape, because in all cases it's a visual way of telling stories. But as you move online, a couple of other things have happened. Number one, as our videos move from traditional sit on the couch with the family watching, where we would spend an hour, hour and a half watching a long-form program, when we're online, we aren't willing to spend that kind of time. We're 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Our attention spans have gotten shorter. And it's not because I think we're less interested in learning. It's that there's so much distraction for what needs to be given our attention to. And we're driving, hopefully not while watching video, but we're driving and we're seeing signs or talking to the people or listening to the radio. Our attention is fragmented. And I think this is not necessarily a good thing, but as video producers, we have to take advantage of it. So how has video changed for the web? One, it's become much more single message focused. Number two, it's become shorter. Number three, it's doing what it can to be visually eye-grabbing to get the attention of somebody. If you have a compelling message, then you don't need to do much to grab eyeballs. But if you're an ad agency or a designer, how do you know people are going to stop on your particular piece of video? You want to try to hook them in. It's like the old adage, if you're doing a music video and a group has no performing talent and they can't sing, what do? You surround them with half-naked models, because by then nobody's paying any attention to the fact the group can't sing and can't dance. So shorter videos, single focus on messaging, and the web then simply becomes our distribution technology.
And do you think digital companies, creative companies are really using online video to its maximum potential, or are we still early days in finding out what video can really do online?
One of the challenges I have is video producers will come up to me and say, what's the absolute potential? How can I take advantage of video? And it's very similar to talking to a graphics designer. Have you ever asked a graphics designer, have they achieved the full potential that's available to them in Photoshop? And they'll look at you like you're nuts. Of course they haven't. There's depths to Photoshop nobody's discovered. There's depths to video that nobody's discovered. I mean, who would have thought a dancing chihuahua would get 800 billion views on YouTube? It's the story. It's the messaging. If you have a compelling story, it can be black and white, people will watch. If you can have a compelling story, it could have title cards, people will watch. If you have a compelling story, the technology is a part of. But the worst that happens is somebody throws all kinds of dollars at technology with no story. And you end up with a high budget something that nobody's going to watch. Have we explored the full depths? We haven't begun to explore the full depths. What happens is, as we start to have hundreds of millions of people watching the same video on YouTube and contributing questions and ratings, suddenly videos become interactive in a way that's never been before. Well, this is both a very scary and a very enabling kind of experience. Scary if you've been used to controlling it all the time, and enabling if you've never had any control, and suddenly you can point to somebody and say, hey, I've got 2 million people are watching my video and it was shot on $1.98. Well, that doesn't mean the technology has no value, and it doesn't mean the quality has no value, because the books that you read and the books that you remember are written by people that know how to write. And the stories that you see and the stories you remember are composed by people that have an understanding of the technology, but the technology is changing. So do we have a clue what's going on? No, we're all investigating together. But the good news is that by experimenting, giving ourselves permission to experiment, well, what happens if I do a webisode? Instead of having a 30-minute program, what happens if I do 6 5-minute programs and string people along? Why, they'll watch. What happens if I have a cartoon character as my lead character interacting with live people? Well, in traditional ways, that would be very expensive. With the web and lowering our quality standards, all of a sudden we can do stuff we never did before technically. What happens if we start to do 3D? On a small itty-bitty web picture, maybe not so much. Theatrical film releases, huge. Well, we're now in a period of experimentation where we can do things we never could before. And our job as creative professionals is to experiment, see what works, get rid of the stuff that doesn't, because at the end of the day, it's telling stories. It's telling stories about why they need to buy our product, why they need to read our magazine, why they need to come to our particular school, why they, either change minds or provide information, or most importantly, just give ourselves a chance to relax. With the pressure that's going on today, relaxation's hard to find.
Do you think there's a big difference between what's happening in the US and what's happening in the UK in terms of video production and online video?
I think online videos are pretty much the same. I think in terms of production, the US is way ahead of the UK in HD, but that may not necessarily be a bad thing. HD is just a snake pit. There are so many competing formats, and there's so much confusion, and there's so much incompatibility that to wait for some of the noise to settle down and start to pick on a couple of formats that make sense. In the States, depending upon how I count it, there's over 400 high-definition formats, and every single one of them is incompatible with something else. You don't need that level of pain. Look at the anguish that went through here just a couple of years ago when they made the switch from 4:3 to 16:9. It was still PAL, but you still had to get people with all new TV sets, you had to get all new transmission systems, you had to do all new cameras. I mean, the pain was significant, and you were still standard def.
I mean, is there something else out there that is worth keeping an eye on in terms of the next big thing in video?
Oh, 3D, clearly. Theatrical's going 3D. There's still a lot of debate as to whether this is a flash in the pan or not, but it's a big thing that's out there. Increased storage, which gives us even larger file sizes. There's a dichotomy right now. The web wants small file sizes. The web thinks 640 by 360 is huge. But for that, that's smaller than standard def. You move to high def, we're looking at 2K images for digital intermediates, 4K images coming off the red. The red was starting to do a 28K image, though nobody had any idea what to do with something that big. There's always going to be a need for bigger, because it makes effects work a lot easier. The bigger your image, your effects work becomes simpler. But that doesn't mean we're going to take a 28K image and transmit it. The transmission facility would grind to a complete halt. So I think we're going to be in a system where transmission is 720 or 1080 for the foreseeable future, where the web, yes, the web is going to get bigger, but even on a laptop, a 14-inch monitor doesn't display a 1080 picture, doesn't have enough pixels. So I think what happens is we need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and say, how is this going to be consumed? There's so much, it's so easy to get caught up in the marketing, and it's so easy to get caught up in the hype, that many times we need to take a step back and say, all right, what's really true here? And where do we really need to be? And that's where publications like yours come into play. Because you're trying to help, one, you want to tell the new stuff, because everybody wants to know what's new. But if you're doing your job right, it's not only how does the new stuff, is it new, but how does it apply, and what's meaningful? And is it meaningful to spend $5,000 and buy a camera that shoots a 2K image when you're only going to put it onto the web and it's only going to be 640, 360? This would be a bad choice. You can spend the money somewhere else. And finding experts that have that kind of that knowledge and share it, that's what I'm finding is really the hard part. Is you should never say no to say no, but equally you should never say yes to say yes. You should always say, what's in it for me? What are my benefits? How am I going to use it? And what technology meets that need? For instance, if your viewers could see the camera that you're recording on right now, you're not using a $200,000 camera. It's not going to the web. Well, why aren't you using a $200,000 camera? A company your size can afford it, and a company your size has the talent to use it, but you're not using it. You're using something that's much more meaningful to the operation. Yet you're doing professional grade web videos. Well, does that mean that you can do professional grade web videos without spending $200,000 for the camera? Sure. It's the knowledge that you possess and the knowledge that you can acquire that makes choosing the right gear make sense. It's when you don't know and you blindly decide or don't find out that trouble arises. And that's where people like you and people like me try to help.